Hi, I'm your host, Brittany Caldwell, and I thank you for joining us on Becoming, a show where we encourage, motivate, and inspire women to become all that God has created us to be. And one of the ways that we do this is through sharing our stories of faith, perseverance, setbacks, and victories. And today's guest who will be sharing her story is Elizabeth Stewart. Elizabeth, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So Elizabeth is a wife, a mom, an artistic director, and is currently getting her master's in seminary. Is also a worship leader at her church and is a classical pianist. So she is one busy lady, and I can't wait for everyone to hear your story.
Oh, it's an honor. Thank you.
So I want to start off by just asking you, since 5 years old, you knew that you wanted to be a classical pianist. So what was that experience like training for that?
Childhood is a great question to ask about because you almost always can uniquely capture the joy of what it was at first. So I know that I loved the music of the church, and I know that I loved all kinds of sounds. Like I loved the sounds that boxes made when they closed, or like if a commercial jingle would come on, I immediately wanted to go and duplicate it at the piano. So no, I've loved music since the beginning.
Ever since that. And so then you were training to become a classical pianist.
So it didn't start out that way. I think somewhere in there I realized that I was good at it. And it's funny how an initial joy can change in the comparison trap. It's almost like a funnel. And so instead of pursuing it for the joy or the joy that I had in Christ, it became a way to compete, or it became a way to be better than someone else, or somewhere in my psyche I think that become more valuable than somebody else. So through junior high and high school, I'd worked my way up to practicing 5, 6, 7 hours a day.
Wow. Yep. Wow. Okay. So that was on the journey that you were on. But then something happened in high school where you got injured. Could you talk a little bit about that?
So the path that I had laid out for myself was conservatory, and I wanted to play with major orchestras. Two things happened. One, I was a little bit disillusioned with both God and the church. So there were a couple of specific situations where I was seeing that church leadership was not doing the things that were laid out in Scripture and by God. And then the second thing was I started developing lots of pain in my left shoulder. And at first that was workable, but as my junior year progressed, the pain had moved down to my elbow and then all through my fingertips to the point that my hands started closing up.
Wow. And what was that called?
Thoracic outlet syndrome.
Okay. So then when you had that syndrome, you're going through that. I'm sure that was a very tough experience for you. But then you moved to New York. Why did you move to New York, and what was that experience like?
So I moved to New York after having seen a dozen practitioners, osteopath, chiropractors, the Cleveland Clinic for Dancers and Musicians. I had tons of injections, and the very last physician that I saw my senior year said, "Elizabeth, you're simply not built for competitive music." And I largely let go of that dream. So I took a small period of time off, and it was my mom who did all of this research and found this incredible instructor in New York City who helps injured musicians. So that was my reason for moving to New York.
So you were 19 when you moved there. So were you getting the training that you were expecting to get when you went there? Was it what you thought it was going to be?
I don't think anything about a girl from Mississippi moving to New York City is going to be within the boundaries of expectations. So I had no idea what I was getting into. I think most of the time when young women move to New York City, they have some sort of expectation for celebrity. And what I learned through New York, and I learned tons of things through New York, and it is where I got my music back. But it's also where my view of God was completely restructured. God got much, much bigger. And there's a lot more to say there.
Okay.
Largely, the lesson that I learned is that pursuing celebrity is not necessarily a biblical concept. Legacy is a biblical concept. It's Howard Hendricks who says that. And so I think celebrity is what are people saying about me, but legacy is what is it that God's doing through me.
Wow. I love that. And I know that you also mentioned that you felt like your self-worth was in being a classical pianist, right?
It was completely tied up in that.
Wow.
So when I moved to New York, I felt lost. And the people who were in my age demographic at school, even when I would go to the practice room. So if you've ever been in a classical practice room, it's like these teeny weeny little barracks, and you put your coat in, but you can hear everything that's going on around you. So the people surrounding me sounded like I used to sound, but I had to go through these slow, very monotonous exercises. But it ended up being the best thing for my soul, because what I found out is that God uses the broken, and God uses the humble, and fruitfulness is exclusively through obedience.
And that's where you also, so your spiritual growth increased because of that.
Absolutely.
And I think you mentioned to me that that's where you fell in love again with church music.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And I'm so grateful for this part of my deliverance, because I couldn't do as much, right? So instead of all this doing, and I was frantically doing up until New York, I had to invest in being. So one of my favorite quotes is from a book called Rewriting Your Broken Story. And it says, the only way to fix a broken story is to put it in the context of one that ends well. And so as I am in church, I'm not doing in church, I'm soaking up the music of the church. And in this city, the music of the church was quite diverse. So I got to find out about all sorts of exquisite genres and what it was that God was saying through all those different genres, because it's never just one thing.
Wow. I love that, because you came from a church. You grew up in the church.
Yes.
But you really found God when you moved to New York and was able to experience him in a way that you never had before. And it came to you at a broken state. At a state where you wasn't at the top of your game, at a state where you knew that you had to lean on God for all understanding, right? So that is just so amazing. That's encouraging for me to hear as well, just being for myself in the entertainment industry. And I know that there are a lot of people that do seek after stardom and, being a celebrity. And on the surface, that may seem very just natural and harmless. But if we're not careful, we can get caught up in wanting that and wanting the light on us instead of wanting the light of Christ to shine through us.
I think that's why I think your ministry is so exquisite, because, for example, with the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is telling this group of people, beware of practicing your righteousness before men to be noticed by them. But the irony of that is he's in front of a group of people, right? And so I think the point is we're playing to an audience of one. It's not that we can't have a camera. It's not that you can't be a celebrity. It's that I'm playing to this audience of one with open hands.
That's so true too, because then on the other end of the spectrum, some Christians may want to step back away from the light, away from the limelight, or away from the camera when, God could be calling you onto that platform. He may say, no, I want you to be in the entertainment industry. I want you to be in front of the camera because of how I'm going to use you. So don't let the fear of, I guess, losing me or not being in my will cause you to not even walk in your purpose. That was something I kind of battled with as well. Is this exactly where God is leading me? Because I don't see a lot of me there in the industry, and it can be very, very dark. And so I wonder, is he leading me there? And it was almost as if God was saying, no, I'm leading you there to be the light.
Yes.
If we don't go, then darkness will still be there. I need you to go to be the light. So
as you're saying that, I'm so grateful that you did, because as I'm thinking about it, look at Moses. He doesn't want that, right? And he's like, well, I don't speak. Well, I can't even tell you how many times I said that. I don't speak. But then we've got God going back to him saying, pick up the staff in your hand.
Yeah.
He's gonna use it. And another vetting process that I've used is this edifying to others? Is this giving life to others? And your ministry is getting in there and saying, there's hope. There's hope in every demographic, every color, every situation. We're not victims. There's hope.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. There's hope. So I want to get back to, so after New York, you moved from New York and you went to Mississippi first, right? And in between that time, you got married?
Yes.
Okay, so explain to us how you met your husband and then what that move was like, why you moved away from New York.
My husband, I love him. So 9/11 happened in New York City, not what anybody thought was going to happen. And this guy from my hometown started writing me letters, like actual snail mail, put a stamp on it, letters. So we started writing back and forth. He started coming to visit me in New York City. And I loved the things that he had to say about God. So I did marry him. We moved back to Mississippi for a short time. And then when we came here
To Charlotte?
Thank you, it was supposed to be so that both of us could go to graduate school. So he was going to go to seminary, and I thought I would pursue music therapy because I'd found so much soul nurture in music. As soon as I got here, the week that I got here, they ended that graduate program. And so I was 8 months pregnant in a town that I didn't know. Michael was in school, that's my husband. And I started to feel an overwhelming sense of lost. Just, I love the name of your show, Becoming, because we're always becoming. And at that moment, I was then a flourishing believer, but I didn't know what to do with any of the gifts that God had given me, and I really didn't know how to be a mom. And my husband was largely taking on a role that I wanted, school, and instead I was home with a baby who at the time screamed constantly.
And so, okay, when you moved from Mississippi and then Charlotte, was it in the back of your mind that you would still pursue being a classical pianist, or was it just that you wanted to be in music at that point? I'm just wondering what was going on in your mind.
I think I just wanted to nurture people with music. So the competition side of it, I had pretty gladly laid down at that point. I just at that point, I knew I wanted to give back.
Gotcha. Okay. And then, so you became a mom. Your husband was in school.
Yes.
And your dad passed away during all of this, right? Which,
so it feels like those were my cyclone years.
Wow.
So I couldn't figure out if I really was the same person once I'd become a mom. And I was playing the piano for the church that we attend because I was mostly trying to help my husband through school. We needed some cash. And all of a sudden, my worship pastor quit, and my dad was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And up to that point, with the exception of my husband, my dad was the closest to me of any person on the face of the earth.
Wow.
I felt like with my dad, I could say, I have this enormous problem, like dump the whole puzzle on this table. And he would just say, this is a great puzzle. So I also, somewhere at the back of my mind, say at the back of your mind, I thought Christians don't, if they're really praying, maybe they won't suffer or not suffer like that, because I watched him end up looking more like my cheerful, rosy dad ended up looking more like a Holocaust victim. And so I just kept thinking, well, we're going to pray and you're going to get better. And I think what I learned through that is he did get better. He just didn't get better on this side.
Right. Wow. And so a lot was going on in your life at that moment. And I'm sure that people who are watching can relate to that, even if it's not the exact thing of having a plan for your life and then just things hitting you from left to right and then not looking how you expected. What helped you maintain your strength through all of that? And I'll give you that.
Oh, thank you. Sometimes I didn't. And I think that's okay to say. I didn't know what to do with that season. And I think that maybe is where I largely discovered the Psalms, because 33% of those things are lament. And you don't get to skip the sad part to get to the part where you want to be. So as he was dying, when my worship pastor left, the staff at my church asked me if I wanted to take that position, which I did not. I mean, I didn't know anything about leadership. I didn't think I was a leader. I didn't have any seminary training. It's like that thing we were saying, not that I'm likening myself to Moses, but I can at least say those words. I don't want this job. And I felt like I couldn't do it.
So where did the idea come from that you felt like you couldn't do it?
Well, I don't think it was from God. It seems like when the enemy convicts us, it's always something sweeping, like you could never, you don't deserve, you won't be able to keep going, you're broken, your past is too much of a mess. But it seems like when God convicts, it's always one thing at a time. So I would say that's from the enemy.
Right, exactly. And so eventually, though, you did step into that position. So what was that breaking point like for you?
So I remember we had a small, unair-conditioned car. The first baby was in the back seat. I pulled into my driveway, and I was just sitting there staring in front of the front of this house. And I said to God, I could not even be who I was supposed to be. You didn't bring healing to who I begged you to bring healing to. I'm lost. I can't do this. I don't want this. I don't want any part of this. And I remember, and I can't say that it's not in scripture, but there was in my hurricane this very small voice that said, well, how do you know who you were supposed to be? And so I tried it.
Wow. It was as if God was saying, how do you know who you were supposed to be? And I think oftentimes in life, we're told as children, we're asked as children, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up? And it's like, it can subconsciously put a lot of pressure on us growing up of, oh, what do I want to be? And since I said this at 12, then that is that thing I have to go over. That is that thing I have to be. Since I said I want to be a dancer, then it's ingrained in me. I have to work towards being a dancer. And we have this pressure that we put on ourselves into adulthood. And we feel like if we lay that down, then we're quitters. Then we failed. Instead of just like, no, we explored something and it didn't work or it didn't turn out how we thought. That's okay. We can do something else. And so it sounds like God had to remind you that he's always building you. You're always becoming the thing that he's called you to do. And it's not attached to a title.
Yeah. It's funny you should say that about what do you want to be? Because I think adults tend to ask children, what do you want to be? But it's never, who do you want to be?
Yeah.
And that's the foundational question is, who do you want to be? And once you're who you're supposed to be before God, then now we're in a legacy building place.
Right. Yep. So eventually you stepped into the role of being the worship leader at your church and you realized, I do have it in me to do this. Those were lies from the enemy. I have it in me. So what is that experience like now, walking in that calling of being a worship leader at your church?
I think I realized I do have it in me when I found out it's not me. I'm not trying to become this awesome person. It's what is God doing through me? And that's how we become with eternal value. So what is God doing through me? And when I realized it's really more about loving people, accepting where they are, keeping a humble spirit. When I realized it was more about those things than whatever I could put on the stage that to people was impressive, then I came home.
Wow, that's amazing. And now you're in seminary.
Yeah.
So what led you to go into seminary?
So my youngest son, John, is 7. There were several things leading up to this, but I guess this was the changing point for me. We were sitting together one night. I was putting him in bed, and I was just about to reach for the light, and it's so easy as a mom to be like, 8:30, I clock out. But that's always when they have their questions about, how do you feel about forgiveness? Talk to me about grace. But this particular time he said, Mom, do you ever sit and wonder if everything you believe is wrong?
Wow.
And I almost went for my husband, because he often answers those things, but all of a sudden I thought, how will it be for him if he's my age, so I'm 38, how will it be for him to say, my mom always had to go get my dad? So I prayed about it and I said to him, imagine that you were living in a house and you never left. People came in, but you never left. And people came in with these massive winter clothes on, and at first you accepted it, but then as the years went by, you thought, that's dumb. Why don't y'all get some shorts? It's ridiculous. Why would you wear all this cumbersome clothing? What should that man do? And my son turned to me and said, well, he should have checked for himself. And so I told him, the questions aren't the issue. Always be a checker. We engage the question and we love the question. And so at that time, I thought I would like the confidence and the time duration to be just a little bit shorter between the question and the answer. So it's not that I can have fancy answers. It's so that I can love people and so I can approach them in an engaging, loving way.
I love that. We are always supposed to search for the answers and search for God, and not just take what is given to us just on Sunday mornings, but really go into the Word and have a relationship with God on our own.
Yes.
So I love that you took that step to do that and go into seminary. There's one question that I always ask all of our guests. In the midst of all this and the journey that you continue to be on, who do you see yourself becoming?
Like Christ. And I think what that means is simply loving the next person. And after all of this, I've largely decided not to try to put some kind of box around it or frame, but just to say, looking like Christ is loving the next person well. And I think that's what we take into eternity.
Wow, I love that. And I can definitely see you becoming that, because it's apparent that Christ's light is shining through you. So you are becoming like Christ.
Likewise.
If you could encourage the viewers with just anything that you want to encourage them with, what would you want to tell them?
I think that a walk with Christ is not quite as complicated as they think. So sometimes I think as believers, we're upset with ourselves if we're not checking off box XYZ. So maybe I didn't spend, in my mind, enough time in prayer, enough time in the Word. Well, here's the thing. You can take one phrase, lean not on your own understanding. And in that moment when I'm like, okay, lean not on your own understanding, what does that mean? God, I give this to you. That's walking with Christ. So I think it's just one good decision at a time.
Okay, I love that. And I love your story. And I thank you again for coming and just talking with us today and sharing your experiences. And I pray that you were touched by Elizabeth's story as well. I pray that it was a blessing to you as much as it has been a blessing to me. And I look forward to seeing you become all that God has created you to be. Thank you so much for watching.